Hello everyone, welcome back to part 5 of Theme 3 Kinship, Caste and Class Early Societies. We'll talk about social differences within and beyond the framework of caste. The topics that we'll discuss today are the right occupation and non-Kshatriya kings. The learning outcomes after the end of this video lesson are that you would be able to tell about untouchables, you would be able to enlist the four Varnas according to their order as per Brahmanical texts, and explain the existence of non-Kshatriya kings. Now let's talk about the basis of existence of social differences. The term caste, we are quite familiar about caste. The term caste refers to a set of hierarchically ordered social categories. The social categories and the differences are ordered in a hierarchical manner. It means from top to bottom. The ideal order was laid down in the Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras. So we get the information about the origin of caste system or these categories from Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras. And in fact, Brahmanas claimed that this order in which they were ranked first was divinely ordained. So that has been justified by the Brahmanas that this order is something given by God, something ranked divinely, while placing groups classified as Shudras and untouchables at the very bottom of the social order. Positions within the order were supposedly determined by birth. So simply, the lowest category, untouchables or the Shudras, were created, and all these categories were based or determined by birth. So if somebody got birth or gets birth in a family of Brahmanas, he or she would be considered as Brahmana. And if somebody would get birth in the family of Kshatriyas, they would be considered Kshatriyas. Vaishya, then Vaishyas. Shudra, then Shudras. So it's completely determined on the basis of birth. Now let's talk about the Varnas in detail. Varnas. Varna is a Sanskrit term derived from Vra. It has been derived from Vra Dhatu. Vra means to cover, to envelope, count, classify, consider, describe, or choose. A Sanskrit word with several meanings include type, order, color, or class was used to refer to social classes in Hindu texts like the Manusmriti. These and other Hindu texts classified the society in principle into four Varnas: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishya, and Shudras. You can see the picture here. So four categories of Varnas: Brahman, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. Now let's talk in detail about the Varna system. The Varna system is extensively discussed in Dharma Shastras. According to the Varna system in Dharma Shastras, the society has been divided into four Varnas: Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishya, and Shudras. So these are the four categories under the Varna system. Those who fall out of the system because of their grievous sins, wrong things that they have done, maybe in the previous birth, that is the understanding. So based on their grievous sins, are ostracized as outcasts, untouchables, and considered outside the Varna system. So those who were considered that they have done grievous sins, I mean, all the wrong things in their previous life, as for the consideration, they were considered as outcasts. It means outside from the caste, untouchables, and considered outside the Varna system. Now let's understand how Brahmanas justified their act of the Varna system, or how it has been justified that the Varna system, as we discussed on the previous slide, has been ordered by the god or given by the god. So it is considered as a divine order. This source clearly clarifies their or justifies according to the Brahmanas. Source 6, a divine order. To justify their claims, Brahmanas often cited a verse from a hymn in the Rig Veda known as the Purusha Sukta. So this particular hymn or shloka or song clearly mentions about the Varna system and justifies the Varna system. And this particular Sukta is known as Purusha Sukta. And it describes the sacrifice of Purusha, the primeval man, the earlier man, or in other words, consider as Brahma, the creator. All the elements of the universe, including the four social categories, were supposed to have emanated from his body. So it is believed that all the varnas and all the elements of universe, whether it's earth, moon, or other planets or air, everything came out of the primeval man or Brahma or the first Purush. The Brahmana was his mouth, of his arms was made the Kshatriya, his thighs became the Vaishya, of his feet the Shudra was born. So mouth for Brahmana, arms for Kshatriya, thighs for Vaishya, and feet for the Shudra. And in this way, the whole Varna system had been justified. So the source tells us about it. So why do you think the Brahmanas quoted this verse frequently? So this question is to think, and clearly we can understand that is for the justification. Now it has also been laid out what would be the right occupation and what is the right occupation. So let's talk about the right occupation. The Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras also contained rules about the ideal occupations of the four categories or varnas. So what would be their work or occupation that had been mentioned in the Dharma Sutras or Dharma Shastras? Brahmanas were supposed to study and teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices and get sacrifices performed, and give and receive gifts. So this was the work of Brahmana, to study and to teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices and get sacrifices performed, and give and receive gifts. Kshatriyas were to engage in warfare. They had to fight and to protect everyone, protect people and administer justice, study the Vedas, get sacrifices performed, and make gifts and give gifts to others. The third category of Varna, that is the Vaishyas, were expected to engage in agriculture, pastoralism, to rear animals, and trade, business, right? So these were considered as Vaishyas. The next category was the category of Shudras. they were assigned only one occupation. That was to serve the three Varnas, to provide service to the three other Varnas. Now, as we already discussed about the Varna system and how they were justified, let's discuss all the points related to the strategies for enforcing the right occupation norms. So, what would be the right occupation and what were the strategies used by the Brahmanas, or what were the strategies used in the society to justify or to enforce right occupation norms? The first one, the first way was, one was to assert that the Varna order was of divine origin, as we have already seen from the Purusha Sukta. So it had been shown as of divine origin. God has decided, God has given, or the eternal God has given this. The second thing is they advised kings, the Brahmanas advised kings to ensure that these norms were followed within their kingdoms. So as the Kshatriyas used to rule, or the kings used to rule, the kings were advised by the Brahmanas, and they used to advise that these norms must be followed in their kingdom. Now, another way was they attempted to persuade people that their status was determined by birth. And the other thing is that the Brahmanas persuaded, because they used to do different rituals, different practices, or the religious practices were performed by the Brahmanas. So they used to convince people. Persuade means convince people that their status was determined by birth, that everyone's status or everyone's Varna is something that is determined by birth. Another thing is that they also reinforced these norms by stories like Mahabharata and other texts. As we have seen several examples, we'll discuss some other examples as well, that these texts justify the presence of Varna system and the rules or the practices associated with them. Now we have another source to justify the proper social roles, and this is an excerpt taken from Mahabharata. So here is a story from the Adi Parvan, means the initial or chapters or sections of the Mahabharata. Once Drona, a Brahmana who taught archery to the Kuru princess, was approached by Eklavya, a forest-dwelling Nishada, a hunting community. So Eklavya belonged to Nishada community. Nishads were the people who lived in forest or the forest dwellers. So he approached Drona. When Drona, who knew the Dharma, refused to have him as his pupil, Eklavya returned to the forest, prepared an image of Drona out of clay, and treating it as his teacher, began to practice on his own. So he approached Drona and requested him to teach archery. However, according to the Dharma, a Nishad community is not or was not entitled to learn archery, because that was something meant for the Kshatriyas, and hence Drona refused to teach archery to Eklavya, and thereafter Eklavya went back to the forest, and there he made a statue of Drona and practiced himself. and in due course he acquired great skill in archery. One day, the Kuru princess went hunting and their dog wandering in the woods, in the forests, came upon Eklavya. When the dog smelt the dark Nishada wrapped in black deer skin, his body caked with dirt, it began to bark. So, when the dog saw Eklavya started barking, and thereafter Eklavya got annoyed and shot 7 arrows into its mouth. And when the dog returned to the Pandavas, they were amazed at this superb display of archery. And they tracked down Eklavya, who introduced himself as a pupil of Drona. So when Pandavas asked from where Eklavya had learnt archery, he said that he is a student, a pupil of Drona, and they were surprised. And Drona had once told his favorite student Arjuna that he would be unrivaled amongst his pupils. He told Arjuna, Drona had told Arjuna that no one could defeat Arjuna and he would remain unrivaled amongst his all students. Arjuna now reminded Drona about this. Arjuna told about Eklavya to Drona, and Drona approached Eklavya, who immediately acknowledged and honored him as his teacher. So when Drona went to Eklavya, you can see the generosity of Eklavya, and he accepted and honored Drona as his teacher. And thereafter, when Drona demanded his right thumb as his fee or Guru Dakshina, Eklavya unhesitatingly cut it off and offered it. So that was like Guru Shishya Parampara, or the teacher student relationship. And as a way of Guru Dakshina, he cut his right thumb and offered that to the teacher. But thereafter, of course, as Eklavya lost his thumb, right hand's thumb, when he shot with his remaining fingers, he was no longer as fast as he had been before. So of course, now he was not an excellent archer, and in this way you can see here, thus Drona kept his word. No one was better than Arjuna. So this story and this excerpt taken from Adi Parvan of the Mahabharata also tells about the Varna system and about the justification of Varna system. It clearly tells us the story about it. Now we have these questions to discuss. What message do you think the story was meant to convey to the Nishadas? And what message would it convey to Kshatriyas? Do you think that Drona, as a Brahmana, was acting according to the Dharma Sutras when he was teaching archery? So all these questions could be discussed easily, and we got the message what the story gives to Nishadas and what it conveys to Kshatriyas, and whether Drona was following Dharma Shastras or Sutras or not. Now the next thing that we'll discuss is non-Kshatriya kings. As we have already discussed, according to the Dharma Shastras and Sutras, as well as Manusmriti, and according to the Varna system, Kshatriyas used to be kings. However, we'll talk here about non-Kshatriya kings. According to the Dharma Shastras, only Kshatriyas could be kings. However, several important ruling lineages probably had different origins that we see in history, that there are several important ruling lineages. They were not Kshatriyas. The social background of the Mauryas, considered as shepherds who ruled over a large empire, has been hotly debated. the Magadha Empire ruled by Mauryas, and they were not Kshatriyas. Brahmanical texts describe that Mauryas were of low origin, of shepherd community. The Shungas and Kanvas, the immediate successors of the Mauryas, were Brahmins. So another contradiction that we see here. In fact, political power was effectively open to anyone. Very simply, those who were powerful, they ruled. So the political power was effectively open to anyone who could muster support and resources and really depended on birth as a Kshatriya. Now, another point here is uh, an example here that Shakas who came from Central Asia were regarded as Malechas or barbarians or outsiders by the Brahmanas. They ruled northwestern part of India. Now the next thing about non-Kshatriya kings, which is an interesting thing, it is also interesting that the best known ruler of the Satvana dynasty, Gautamiputra Sri Satakani, who ruled over the Deccan region in India during the 2nd century CE, claimed to be both a unique Brahmana. So that had been claimed by him that he was a unique Brahmana. So another thing here, that Brahmana ruling the kingdom and a destroyer of the pride of Kshatriyas who, who have destroyed the pride of the Kshatriyas. He also claimed to have ensured that there was no intermarriage amongst members of the four Varnas. So he was the believer and he ensured that Brahmana would marry Brahmana and every Varna would marry within the Varna. So that is about endogamy here. However, at the same time, there is another contradiction, something opposite to what he mentioned. At the same time, he entered into a marriage alliance with the relatives of Rudradaman, who was a Saka ruler from Western Kshatrap dynasty. So here it is, Vashishthiputra Satakarni, the son of the Andhra king Vashishthiputra Pulmai, married daughter of Saka king Rudradaman. So here you can see Brahmanas quoted Shakas as Malechas. However, you can see the marriage relationship here about the Vashishthiputra Satakarni and the daughter of Saka king Rudradaman. Now have a look on these coins. So these are the silver coin depicting a Shaka ruler circa 4th century CE and a silver coin depicting a Shaka ruler. You can see here. Now the next thing that we need to understand is the integration within the framework of caste was often a complicated process. The Satvanas claimed to be Brahmanas, whereas according to the Brahmanas, kings ought to have been Kshatriyas. So we have seen here that the rulers were not Kshatriyas, they were Brahmanas. And here we have already seen the contradiction in the previous example. They claimed to uphold the fourfold Varna order, but entered into marriage alliances with people who were supposed to be excluded from the system. So they entered in marriage alliances with Shaka rulers who were excluded from the system. And as we have seen, they practiced endogamy. So they practiced endogamy, however, as per the Brahmanical text, there was exogamous system. Now we have these assignment questions and you would be able to answer all these assignment questions on the basis of what we discussed today. Thank you and have a great day.